sometimes you need to look at the man in the mirror. Well, I did that for nothing before in like 4 years.
Yeah.
Where it's just every day, all day. And when you're working, I'll be playing podcasts or music and the voices are louder. And then the next thing you know, you can't even hear the podcast and it's just internal thoughts. And you're kind of going at a mental warfare with yourself.
What is up, my dear friends, and welcome back to another episode here on the Honey, I'm Home podcast of podcasts segmented on the Happy Heart Academy community. And today we have a fun guest in the room, and I'm excited to share his story with you because while I'm sharing his story with you, I'm going to be learning about his story as well. I know that I have had past couple of months to get to know him on a deeper level, and his story is inspiring. Like when we open this up, to know where he came from and where he's at now, it comes along. He has come a long way, and I think you're going to hear that in his own story. And I bring this guy to you today because I believe his story is one where you can learn a lot from the struggle to victory. We all face struggles in our life, and it's not a matter of staying there. It's a matter of overcoming that. So I'm hoping to bring to you a gentleman today that can share with you his struggle and his victory and how he overcame the struggle to create some victory, some momentum, some movement in his life. But before we dive into that, my dear friends, once again, if you guys are struggling to move on and create a happiness after your heartbreak, breakup, separation, or divorce, be sure to check out the free training in the show notes below. There you will gain access to 3 of the most qualified steps, scientifically backed, that will teach you how to begin to create happiness after your heartbreak. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to check out the link in the show notes below. Now on to today's episode where we're going to be talking to my man, Jesse Woods. What's up, brother?
How we doing? It's an absolute honor to be here.
Dude,
Thank you so much.
It's been a minute since, I know we've been talking about this for a while, getting you on the podcast to kind of share your story. And I knowing you well enough, you're going to be doing most of the talking, which is
You're funny. You're funny.
Fantastic.
We'll both go at it.
Yeah, we will. And that's why I wanted to invite you on, is because I feel like we vibe together. We've come from that same background of struggling families and you could say a struggling relational culture. We haven't seen the success that we want to create in our own lives, and we've created some success in our own lives, right?
Yeah.
So you are a incredible artist, and I'm going to blow the roof off this building right now when I happily boast about this, which is that, it's crazy. When you hear this gentleman's story and like where he was just even a couple of months ago prior to, coming into our community here, you went from a place, and I'll let you share the story, but then you have to capitalize on what we just experienced yesterday. What was that? That was, what was yesterday's date? The 6th or 7th or no, it was the 8th, February 8th, 2024. It's a historical moment for my life.
It's monumental.
Monumental. And it was because we got to meet an actual live king.
Yeah.
The king of Uganda.
Process that.
It's crazy, dude. And let me just, not to break the end all be all, because we're going to dive into a lot here today, but dude, you are going to be in your art, your artist realm. What you create is something so fascinating that the king wanted. And he came here, and you are going to give your art to the king. And that art is going to be in a, a royal museum one day. Yeah. So like, that's kind of where you're at. Like, but where have you been, man? Tell me a little bit about your backstory and, where does Jesse Woods come from and how have you gotten from that place to where you are today, speaking to royalty? Yeah.
So honestly, I've done a handful of podcasts before, and, every single time that I'm on a show, it's always about, my art career, my design career, where I came from and what inspired me and everything. But, because I had taken some deep thought knowing that, I was going to be on here, and I don't really know exactly what the premise was going to be, but I understand what you're about. And I think we connect, off air a lot, on a personal one-of-one level. And this is also something I'm very passionate as well, too. I do think I'm a multi-dimensional person where it's like I have different dimensions to myself as far as like what I'm passionate and interested about. Yeah. So I do actually kind of want to share today, and this will probably be the first time on a podcast where I'm actually explaining more my personal story.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I feel like this is the best platform for me to do that. And to kind of just start off, kind of where I came from. So my earliest memories, so I grew up in a very sick family actually. And to kind of summarize that, both my brother and sister were Make-A-Wish children.
What's that mean for those listeners that are not in America?
Yeah. So a Make-A-Wish child would be somebody that is experience difficulties to a level of I guess a hospital or a foundation is basically providing some sort of gift to these children as a, kind of an uplifting moment. And
Yeah.
you don't just like, and why it's like, I guess specific is because you don't, not just anybody could get into that. And it's not like, it's a great thing. It's usually more like, okay, this kid's struggling so much that we want to do something really nice. So Make-A-Wish is a foundation in which that they provide opportunities like that. So for my little brother, it was we went to Disney World,
Wow.
and then my sister really wanted to go to New York. So that
cool.
was like our
Sure.
thing. And yeah, so I was integrated into a family where my brother didn't leave the hospital until he was about 2.5 years old. So like we were like. My life, I remember leaving school and just being at the hospital all the time, like doing homework from the hospital and, basically living out of there. My mother lived there for basically a year to 2 years. And, so as things progressed, my sister also struggles to this day. And it's definitely been challenging because also the sickness that was running through our family, there's certain case studies that's built specifically off of my sister. It's so uncommon that any doctor I go to, we've all seen like a specialist that specifically works on this. It's a mitochondrial, actually. It's a mitochondrial deficiency. But anybody else that we speak it to, they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
Sure.
Any Dr. PC, they're like, what?
Sure.
They stop every time. So that was kind of the very first, part of my life up till about, early teen years. And this, the second half of my teen years, I was the family broke apart and there was a divorce. And I also kind of like had struggles with my family in general. I never really felt welcome and accepted across the board for family. Like there was just a lot of trouble in that like areas, and whether it be because of the sicknesses and stuff like that, there was a lot of just problematic situations that was really complicated for me to understand as a child because I'm a very open, passionate, expressive, like, human that wants to be around people, that wants to be loving and social. So I was like pretty confused as a kid.
Sure.
And that was kind of the start of like developing relationships with people. And it was like coming from a broken area. And it was just, it was tough because like I said, very social and, I wanted to be around people, but I was kind of confused. I'm like, well, why is like, where's this part of my family? Why don't I know them?
Sure.
And I think that trickled into as you grow up and like, now you're making friends on your own or, getting a girlfriend or whatever. And it was kind of a fractured part of my life that I had to heal. And,
how big of an influence do you think that played in your relationships, coming from a broken home? And actually, are you the oldest out of your siblings?
Yes,
So the
yes.
oldest one.
Yeah.
And then so the focus was on you at the beginning between, when your parents were together, and the focus was on you, and then your brother and sister came into the picture, and they came up with, can we call it a terminal illness, or is that not the right word? It's like an illness that needs more attention. So
Absolutely.
how overlooked do you think you felt in those times, and did it play a role into your future relationships or your current relationships that you have now?
Yeah, absolutely. You go through this, and it's still something I battle with today. It's you feel invisible. You feel like you don't exist, and you feel like if you did fall off the face of the earth, nobody would bat an eye. And it doesn't mean that there's not people that love me, but when you're going through life trying to pick up broken pieces and trying to figure out how to make sense of everything, it becomes a battle with yourself of trying to gain acceptance with yourself. And that's something that's, you got to first accept the man in the mirror. Like in my situation, I have to like, learn to love myself and try to balance like this fracturing of relationships and everything. So yeah, it absolutely does. And it's to this day something I'm still working with and
to love yourself and to feel seen.
Absolutely. And just to feel enough really is to feel enough. There's definitely a huge part of me that's like and I'm sure you might have seen this around here, and it's a part of like the work ethic I have. It's consistently trying to show up and be worthy. And there's a fine balance to everything. I'd rather care than not care, so I'm at least proud of some of these things. Like there's results of everything, and you could pull negatives or bad, but I do think it made me, and I think it plays into being an artist and how I was able to figure out all of that stuff.
Yeah. Do you think your self-worth comes from the art that you produce, or do you feel like you have genuine self-worth outside of the production that you create?
So I think there's a little bit of both. I do believe at the end of the day, I do have things to offer. I don't think like the reasons why, my early parts of my life in the family and stuff, I don't necessarily I think that was my fault. There was just much deeper rooted issues that really didn't involve, especially I was a kid, and
Sure.
I didn't really have any say in it.
You're born into the family.
Exactly. So, but I knew from people around me, like, just being a good guy and like having fun and like, people trusting me. Like, I was like, okay, I know that I have a core fundamental set of skills that is appreciated, but it doesn't mean I'm still not battling with like the unresolved maybe things that's happened in the past, where it's always a subconscious lingering, kind of like something on your shoulder. It's on your shoulder, kind of just reminding you.
Sure.
And yeah, you fight with it. And then if you're asking about my art, do I find my worth through that? I think it's just like kind of like a sick game with yourself, where it's like a punishment through art and work, where it's like I'm gonna work myself so hard to become valuable. Like when you don't think that you're valuable enough just as you are, because you have to fight for that, and at least in my experience. And
no, yeah, dude.
Coming from those broken situations, it always just felt like, oh, I gotta prove myself because you don't feel seen. And yeah,
dude, I love and appreciate that you're sharing that, because even we got Swing over there on the producer table, and like just from all artists, right? I think that one powerful thing that most artists have done, which can be a tricky thing or a dark hole at times, is that we trick ourselves into thinking that we are dealing with our problems by mass producing, or showing up and producing the content that we're here to produce, right? So like part of my learning curve, in order to become a better leader and lover in my own home, was that I had to stop actually working for a little bit of time to disconnect myself from my productivity, or my artwork, or the amount of numbers that I have in my business defined me. Right. And it was a sick game, because I thought I was healed, so to say. I thought I was at peace with what has happened in my life, and to realize that I wasn't ever at peace.
Yeah.
And what I really was distracted the entire time that I thought I was actually in peace with what has happened. But I just continued to cope through hard work and through discipline. And like, the place that I found the most seen, because I agree, I think I was abandoned multiple different ways as a child, or like, even I always felt like I had to fight for people to like me. I always had to fight for people to respect me, or to love me, or to make me feel enough. And maybe even to this very day, I still have those subtle moments where I can tap into those moments where I'm like, I don't feel enough. That's why I produce so much. Because, but then I had to ask myself, when will I allow myself to feel enough?
Yes.
When will I have allowed myself to be able to feel enough, so that I don't have to continue to chase anything? I'm just doing it out of the goodness of my heart.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's like, so you went through this time in your life where you felt maybe abandoned, you didn't feel seen, and maybe lonely even at times. And as an artist, I know we all go through that, because I'm a different artist. I write, right?
Absolutely.
I write and I speak. That's my art. Your art is incredible. It's unique. It's so unique that, like we talked about, a king sought you out to, ask you for a pair of your shoes. And talk about the transition from the time that you were at your low, and where you found like because there was a time that you probably didn't do shoes, right? There was a time. Now, what did the producing of your art do for you? And when did you find that?
Yeah. So what really happens in that situation is, as you like start to figure yourself out in life, and I was taking all like the quote unquote traditional routes, because I felt like that was what I was supposed to do, because that's what I was told. So again, it's just this trying to be accepted, where you're like, okay, if this is what you think is right, this is what I'm going to do. And I think that I kind of woke up at some point in like my mid 20s, maybe even early 20s, and I realized to myself, like, hey, listen, like, this is not exactly where I find myself the most fulfilled. So, I took a bit of a gamble on myself to, start pursuing this. And then it really becomes a situation where there's also a darkness within that, because it sounds like, oh, you start finding yourself. Well, no, actually what happens is then now you're essentially competing in this realm of creating. And I know, maybe competing is not the
You're
right
competing.
word. Yeah.
You're
Okay.
competing.
And I'm glad that,
You're competing against yourself. You're competing against the people that are doing close
Yeah.
to what you're doing. You're always judging yourself. You're always
Yes,
criticizing
yes.
your past work. It's a
Yes,
dark
yes.
place, dude.
Absolutely.
It can be a dark place.
Yeah, and then you get locked in, and honestly, like, a part of why my stuff is so unique, and like when people see it, and it's like it is like a very uncommon space that I'm in.
Mhm.
It's just a part of it. Like, it takes like kind of a broken person to lock themselves in a studio for 3.5, 4 years, and there's no joke when I like, and I've said it before. It's like there were points at times, there was months and months and months of not leaving my studio, not seeing, talking, texting, calling anybody. It was just working, finding myself, and it's just kind of just going into a hibernation to like also
It's a
find
solitude.
yourself. Yeah, absolutely,
Dude,
absolutely.
and that's something I preach in the Happy Heart Academy is that you really do have to make time for yourself in order to find yourself. The
Yeah.
reason why you don't know who you are or what you want is because you haven't spent enough time with you and sitting in solitude without distractions. And
Yes.
so the most difficult thing for us human beings nowadays, man, is that we have to learn to sit alone or like not be so distracted. Even when we're in our offices or when we're working or whatever we're doing, watching a movie, you still pick up your phone. You're still
Yes,
always
yes,
distracted.
absolutely.
You're always staying distracted because
Absolutely.
there's this internal chaos going on within ourselves that we have to learn to lead ourselves out. And the only way that we can do that is to do what you did. You had a location, you had a studio, or you went to a place where you locked yourself in for a while and disconnected yourself from all the distractions to hone in on yourself
Yeah.
and your art. Most people don't give themselves the time to do that. So what lesson did you learn in those moments of just sitting in solitude? What did you feel like you've taken? What's your biggest takeaway from that moment of solitude and finding, whatever you found?
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, like, it does, like, on the outside looking in, and it was very tough for myself going through those times, but I genuinely am very proud of that time because of the immense amount of self-reflection that I went through. I mean,
Feel like you're suffering in there at all?
100%, 100% of the time too. Like, there really wasn't any peaceful time. It was constantly combing over, reflecting. A lot of times you'll tell somebody or you'll hear online or whatever, like, sometimes you need to look at the man in the mirror. Well, I did that for nothing before in like 4 years.
Yeah.
Where it's just every day, all day. And when you're working, I'll be playing podcasts or music, and the voices are louder, 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 louder. And then the next thing you know, you can't even hear the podcast, and it's just internal thoughts. And you're kind of going at a mental warfare with yourself. And, what's really interesting to kind of to move into like where we're at today, it's like,
Yeah, how'd you lead yourself out of that?
yeah, I feel like I came out on top, and it really was through the mission that I set myself on. That,
The mission, you said.
yes, the mission was to provide enough value in my space that when I could get into different rooms, I could then show my character through my art and then be myself.
Dude, can I stop you for a minute?
Absolutely. Go
That's
ahead.
so important because what has happened was the same thing. My suffering ended once I created that mission or that vision for myself, and that mission or vision actually catapulted me out of my own suffering.
Yes.
Now, granted, I still like had troubled thoughts and I still had troubled
100%.
times, and I still battle
100%.
with that inner critic that you're talking about when you do have the podcast on or you do have the music on, and you can still you drown that out and you listen to the inner thought that's telling you, like, just screaming about, like, you definitely messed that up, or and you're just digging yourself into that hole, right? That hole is way too familiar for me. And so, like, when I started to realize, like, my suffering ended the moment that I stopped focusing in on me, myself, and I. Like, when it's all about me, I suffer. And so what you've done, which is what I don't want people to miss here, which is so important, is like, you did two of the main things that I like religiously speak about. You sat in solitude super hard. Disconnected yourself from the world to reconnect yourself back to your internal world. Battled the demons that you're going to face. That's what solitude does.
Head on.
Strength. You don't need to run 10 miles in order to strengthen the internal mentality that you're looking. Everyone's looking for mental toughness, right? Well, go sit alone and don't distract yourself. And I promise you, that war is going to be greater than any mile that you run.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And it's like, what I praise you on, man, and job well done, is because You sat in solitude, disconnected to reconnect back with yourself. And in those moments of reflection, you overcame the battle that most people lose, the mental game.
Yeah.
And then you created your mission. So continue with your mission and where you're at today.
Yeah. So, and just to kind of also put a bow tie on everything, it's like I actually found myself being proud of, like, you know what, like all of the stuff that's in the past, it's like, no, I actually am a good man. Like I do have passion. I do care for people immensely. And I think being so disconnected on the opposite side of things, I mean, life is painted in such a pretty picture and everything's great. Sure. Instagram and all that. People see the clients that I've worked with and they see my work and they're like, man, life must be amazing. And I just always laugh. I always laugh. But I found, as much darkness as that was in there, I found myself being proud of the man I am. Now, that doesn't mean I'm perfect. I have a ton of stuff I still got to work on. Yeah. But I ended up being proud. So you then take that confidence that, oh, I know what it's like. Like what? I got to pull an all-nighter to get this? I'll do it. I got this deadline I got to get. I got to balance all these things. I'll do it. Like there's a certain level of mental toughness that you're able to build up in that time. And then when you step out into the world and you now leaving this solitude, you're like, I have this incredible product that people absolutely love, and I feel like I've developed and grown as a man. And then you are able to walk into a new situation and merge those two, exactly. But sure, now where I want to express incredible and immense gratitude is people have that and they still find themselves lost. I could only sit here and be so thankful to be in this studio today for all of the events that led up to why I'm here today. And hence, then furthermore, meeting the king and having a meeting with the penguin. Like, there's a lot of stuff that just in this last week, and yesterday was an emotional moment for me. And I haven't really shared that, but
why? What was so emotional about it?
So just the fact that, like, I the thanks that I had for coming in here, and I've expressed it to everybody here, where, coming from a polar opposite area where it's like you by yourself in the studio to now I'm around all these people and we're on a like-minded mission. We're all similar enough to where we could, get together. Exactly. And push forward and literally push that rock up the hill, which is, Brian, that's really what that is. And it feels so amazing that I'm like, oh, there are other people like me that have similar stories and similar motivations and motives and stuff. And it's not jaded. Sure. It's not altered. It's, and we're not perfect, but like for the most part, this is like the best situation I've ever found myself that I could ever imagine. And now pushing forward, finding myself in this situation where, now meeting the king yesterday, he came in to get shoes for me and like have a conversation. Which was when the whole thing was being pitched to me, like, hey, King wants to meet you and figure out these shoes. Dude, I've been promised the world 1,000,000 times, okay? And the first time that it actually paid off was coming into this place with Brian. So I was like, oh, wow, that was my, lottery ticket. It's like, okay, it doesn't get much better than this because this is like, I can't believe this happened. And then now it's like these connections that are being made and being in this studio and being here with everybody else, having that king come in and talk to me about my stuff and like actually want to work together. I just like kind of went numb in that moment. I went numb, and it's like it's like that slow motion, when you have a movie and everything's just like kind of humming and hissing around you. That's how it felt. And then I went to, run a podcast to, do the ones and twos on it to film them. And like, they were just preaching messages, and I encourage you guys to go watch it as well too. But there was messages in that just resonated in me, and I had asked for some of those answers the night before, and I didn't know the king was going to be in that day. I didn't know that those questions were going to be answered, and it was their message was from God, actually. And
yeah, I agree.
That's Dude. Yeah. But go ahead. I would like.
No, I just want to say, like, I'm genuinely proud of you, man, because to overcome the darkness, to then find your craft, and then to constantly work on yourself through listening to podcasts, because you and I, dude, there's not too many people out in this world that can hold that I can hold a genuine conversation with, to be on the same wavelength as myself. And that's not anything against anybody else. That could just be a lack of my ability to network with other like-minded individuals that I'm learning to get better at. Yeah. But at the same time, you kind of fell into my world, and I fell into your world, and it was through the network and connection of the people that we know. And you know, with all of that being said, to get to where you are today, and I know I'm not where I want to be.
Yes.
I don't know if I'll ever get to where I
Same.
want to be. I hope that there comes a time in which I feel like I am enough and that I'm at peace with like my life and like where I'm at, and like just things are just good. Like I don't need greatness. I just want, like, I do want genuine good.
Yeah.
Right. For all things. So how important was it that, you know, this is one of the final questions that I have. I have one more after this, but how important was it for you to get to where you are today? How important has your personal growth and self-development been? Like your own studies, your own research, your own wonder of the world and of your own personal issues and trying to learn how to overcome those things. How important was that to you to get to where you are today, surrounding yourself by multimillionaires, billionaires, kings, and some of the most amazing artists that we have here in PA.
And overall, just great people too.
Great people.
Strip all of the great things, like the material, not even material, but just strip all those other things. Just great humans in general.
Yeah.
It's immense, because in those like self-sabotage situations where I felt like I was in through just like working and like, you know, poor self-talk and stuff, I finally walk, you know, I come here and it's finally like, oh, I could take a breath. Doesn't mean everything's complete, but I could, for the first time in so long, take a breath. And you guys are watching this all live in action, like the development of like me, like essentially learning to walk again, like learning to be around people and feel enough. And now I find myself like more open to like, you know, finding myself seeking potentially a relationship down the line. Like, and like these things were just not on the table because of like the space that I was in. You try the relationships during those dark times, hurt people find hurt people, and like it's just a messy situation.
Sure.
And you have to just remove yourself from all of that, continue to figure out more about yourself, and then when you have your time to shine, you know, they say luck is preparation meets opportunity, and it's like I've been preparing. This is my opportunity. So if you want to call it luck, please go right ahead. But there was work that had to go into this, and I now just see myself walking into a different light, being more open, being more free, not having to be so intense in trying to like prove myself and say I'm worthy. I for the first time feel like I'm around people that are family-like, in the sense that are saying, hey, you're enough. And that has just been immense for me. And it's been transforming, like, and slowly breaking off the rust that I've had for so long. And, you know, I find myself happy and like, you know, just emotions that I was genuinely afraid I was going to lose forever. I was fearing for a long time that I was going to lose grip with actually who I was. And that was very scary, because I knew at the core in my heart I was a good man and a good person, a good kid, whatever. But I thought I was going to lose him, because I thought just the rust and all of the darkness was going to like engulf all of that. And it was very, very alarming. So now, as I feel like, you know, I'm starting to like shed back into like who I actually am and move into life, and I feel open and loving and receiving, it feels amazing. And I think that's when those blessings really start coming. Like I said, this week alone has been immense, but like there's been this build up for the past couple months, and you guys are seeing it all live in action. So it's been immense. It's been so great, and I just have no real words to actually capture the emotions. You know, it's the yin and yang of like that extreme dark to, and I'm not saying I'm in extreme light yet, but like for the first time in my life, I see that light at the tunnel. I'm like, oh, it's actually still there. Like, you know, so I'm striving for that.
I think that might just be the spotlight that you're
probably
in front of us. I'm just kidding, dude. You know, my final question, I literally could spend multiple hours with you in deep conversation. Man, I really can. And my last question to you, for all of those that listen to this, which, you know, and I'm so grateful for this, and I don't say this boastingly, but you know, we're almost at 100,000 plus monthly listeners on the podcast, and I can't even.
Congratulations!
Thanks, man. I can't even wrap my head around that. And you know, there's been a lot of people that I've sent me some crazy messages of like overcoming their own suffering, overcoming their own self-doubt, overcoming their own relational conflicts, and even thoughts of suicide and taking their own lives. Like it's been a wild journey.
It's heavy,
right? And I'm grateful that I get to serve those people, because I was those people, right? And and so that's why I relate with them, is because I too you know, I have a picture on my Facebook page that I was standing on top of a bridge looking happy, but that was the day that was going to take my life. Like I was ready to jump. Like I know that's where I was. I found myself, there was no light at the end of the tunnel, right? But like at the end of all of it, like if you can make it through those times, I'm telling you, your life does change, and it changes for the good. And so my final question for you, Jesse, and we'll have you on again, man, because there's a couple different routes that this conversation has opened up to make me want to ask you more questions. But ultimately, if you had, you know, one message to share with the world, okay, like this podcast is now plugged into all multiple billions of people that, you know, can listen to this podcast. What would be your one true message that you would like to share to everyone who's currently listening that seems to be most important to you?
Yeah. So I would say find your passion and find your family. And why that's important is because I think those are two of the biggest pillars that make us feel fulfilled as humans, having a passion and having a family. And the family doesn't have to be blood or anything like that.
Sure, dude.
It could be a mixture of blood, family, and et cetera. And why I say that and why those are so important is because the only thing that kept me going was honestly just a thought of a future life. And, you know, my greatest goal, if you know me as if you know me at this deep level, and I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast, but my greatest goal, what I want the most out of life, it's not to be the best designer in the world. It's not to be the richest man in the world. It's to be a father and a husband.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have that goal down the line where I'm doing all of this stuff for this future situation that may never even happen, like I'm saying you don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow.
No,
like we can't guarantee.
You're a realist. You're a logical realist.
Exactly.
I get it.
So
I understand.
So what kept me fighting through that stuff to get to that end goal, which I do believe as well too. Like as long as, you know, I'm here on this earth, like that's my end goal. And I, you know, through my passion, I want to be able to provide for that family. Yeah. So it's just going to connect. That passion has brought me here to meet you guys and start to build my non-blood family. And then the next step is utilizing that passion and family to then have my own family one day. And to, you know, and I think a lot of the people coming from broken households, like the main goal is to never have anybody else in your family experience that. And you know, there's always variables, but that's going to be something that I will do everything in my absolute passion to make happen. Be an absolute incredible man as a husband and a father. Be able to be a role model, to be able to be present for all of those things. And why I want to, you know, my art to create money is because I want to spend time with them. Yeah. Because the first half of my life was just all working and struggle. Second half, I want to be in the glory of love, happiness, and, you know, genuine experiences. I didn't have that in the beginning. I want that to be the second part. So find your passion and find your family.
Man, so that's huge, bro. I agree. Find your passion and find your family. You know, it doesn't need to be blood family like you said, but you can create that family. And I would even recommend you start with you now. For one piece of actionable takeaway, you know, for those out there that don't feel like enough, maybe you don't feel like the best leader in your home, maybe you don't feel like the best lover, maybe you don't feel like the best, you don't feel like enough, you don't feel worthy of love and appreciation, significance, value to yourself or to others. I ask you, what will it take for you to feel enough? I want you to sit with that this week and really allow yourself to ponder it. What do I have to do in order to feel enough? Because I feel like you're just one answer away from being able to understand what that is. So once again, my dear friends, this is the Honey, I'm Home podcast, and I am forever grateful that you're here. If you found this podcast helpful, supportive, encouraging, and or uplifting, be sure to share it out with 1, 2, or 3 of your friends. And once again, if you are interested in more of connecting with Jesse and finding Jesse and watching his own personal development, his own life development, and following his art, be sure to check him out. Where can they find you at on Instagram and social media? Yeah, so Instagram would be JesseWoods_archives. There we go. And I will make sure to put it in the show notes below. Thank you for being here. And until next time, this is the Honey, I'm Home podcast.